They whispered like I was already gone. My own grandchildren. Their voices slid under my bedroom door, thin as cigarette smoke, thick with greed. Tuesday, Declan said, as if setting up trash collection. Tuesday. That's the day they chose to get rid of me. This house isn't grand. Just an old clapboard place near the Carolina shore, paint peeling like sunburn, floors that creak when the tide shifts. But it's mine. The porch smells of lemon oil, and the cicadas cry loud enough to drown your thoughts if you let them. I raised my daughter here, buried my husband here, and now these children, my blood, want me out of it, like some broken chair they're tired of tripping over. I shuffled into the kitchen. The overhead light buzzed, showing every wrinkle, every line they mocked when they thought I couldn't hear. Ava held a brochure, all pine trees and watercolor smiles. Seabrook Pines. A care facility. That's what they called it. A waiting room for death. It's better for everyone, she said sweetly, but her eyes glittered the way glass does when it's about to cut. Declan leaned back, smug, already counting what he thought he'd inherit. Nora scrolled her phone, snickering at strangers' lives. And Bryce, the youngest, stared at the floor like it might swallow him if he prayed hard enough. I sat at the table. The wood was cool under my palms, steadying me. So, you've decided. My voice was flat, heavy, like the thud of dirt on a coffin. It'll be good for you, Ava pushed, her fake smile cracking at the edges. Company. Activities. Safety. Safety. I almost laughed. They wanted safety for themselves. Safety from the bills. From the responsibility. From the old woman who had fed them, sewn for them, rocked them when they were sick. I picked up the brochure, studied the lies. Gray-haired models grinning at bowls of grapes. Grapes don't make anyone laugh like that. Money does. Control does. You'll need to sign here, I said, tapping the paper. Contact info. They want the responsible family listed. I made sure the word responsible cut deep. They signed quickly, eager to leave. Ava's letters sharp, Declan's sloppy, Nora's tiny, Bryce's careful. I traced each name with my eyes. Names are keys. And I'd just taken theirs. When the door shut behind them, the house sighed back to life. The ocean roared in the distance, steady and patient, reminding me that time erodes stone if you let it. I washed the empty cups, lined them on the rack. My reflection in the window looked back at me, tired, yes. Weak? Not a chance. On my dresser sits a cracked porcelain pelican from a fair Kent once won. Beside it, hidden in a flower tin no one's touched in decades, lies a key. A small thing, but it unlocks a box at the credit union. Inside that box is every move I planned for this day. I open my notebook, the one beneath my quilt. Dates. Times. Every insult I've ever endured written in my hand. I added a line, Sunday. They chose Tuesday. I choose something else. I picked up the phone. The number was etched in my bones. 1 ring. 2. Then the clipped voice of Mr. Harrow, my attorney. It's Joe, I said, calm as ice. Open the envelope. We begin. The wind rattled the shutters. I pressed the notebook flat as if pinning a butterfly to a board. They think I'll be gone on Tuesday. They think they've won. But Tuesday will be the day they finally learn who I really am. Tuesday crept closer, but I didn't tremble. I sharpened myself instead. Every click of the clock was a nail in the box they'd built for me, and I was the one holding the hammer. That night, when the cicadas screamed outside and the porch light buzzed with moths, I slid the flower tin from my closet and pressed the key into my palm until it hurt. Pain keeps you awake, keeps you honest. At dawn, I walked to the Seaport Credit Union. The salt air cut through my lungs, and the streets were still empty, save for gulls pecking at trash. The clerk barely looked at me, just nodded when I presented my ID. The lockbox was cold steel. Inside, documents, letters, photographs. Proof that this house wasn't theirs to take, that I wasn't a piece of furniture to be moved. Years ago, after Kent died, I sat with Mr. Harrow and tied every knot tight. The trust, the fund, the amendments they never dreamed existed. Their signatures on that brochure, those would be the final stitch in the net. I copied the papers I needed and slipped them into an old knitting bag, the one they always laughed at. Nobody checks an old woman's knitting bag. They think it's just yarn and dust. Fools. Back home, Marla was on the phone whispering. Her voice shook, like she knew already she'd chosen the wrong side. Yes, Tuesday, no, she doesn't know. She cut off quick when I walked in. I'll make coffee, I said. My tone didn't ask. It commanded. The kettle hissed like a snake. She set her phone down and fiddled with the hem of her shirt. By afternoon, the house filled with the smell of fried onions and the sound of their false cheer. Ava appeared with a bag of folded clothes, my clothes. Declan dragged boxes out of the attic, muttering about junk. Nora followed, snapping pictures for her cursed social media, making faces behind my back. Bryce carried my quilt, the one I stitched after Kent passed, and dropped it carelessly on the couch. Don't wrinkle that, I snapped, and the room froze for a beat. They weren't used to my bite. Then I smiled, thin, sharp. You'll regret treating that quilt poorly. They laughed. Nervous, brittle laughs. While they fussed with boxes, I slipped into my room and tucked the copied papers beneath the quilt, right where Bryce had crushed it. It almost felt poetic, him burying his own future without knowing it. That night, I sat at my desk. My notebook lay open, the ink fresh and dark. I wrote each of their names again, tracing them with a steady hand. And then I drew a circle around all four. They thought Tuesday would be my last day of freedom. They thought they'd walk me into Seabrook Pines smiling, while the neighbors nodded and pitted them for their sacrifice. But I had other plans. I'd already made a call earlier to someone they didn't know existed. Not Mr. Harrow this time. Another ally, one who lived right under their noses. My neighbor, Mrs. Collins, had been watching. She'd seen the way the children treated me, the way they sneered and pushed. She had her own camera, her own proof. She was tired of their cars blocking her driveway, their music blaring past midnight. She was eager to help. You'll have what you need, she told me on the porch, her eyes glinting like a crow's. People forget old women see everything. Good. Let them forget. The more they underestimate us, the easier it is to strike. When I finally lay down, the quilt pulled over me. I didn't dream. I planned. Every step, every word. I rehearsed the silence I'd hold until the moment I let the trap close. Tuesday was their chosen day. But by Tuesday night, it wouldn't be me who was locked away. It would be them. The morning of Tuesday bled into itself, gray sky, damp air, the kind that makes your bones ache before the storm arrives. I sat at the kitchen table with my chipped mug, steam curling like smoke from a battlefield I hadn't yet fought. The house smelled of burnt toast because Nora thought she could cook. She laughed when the smoke alarm shrieked. "Grandma, your ancient toaster's cursed," she said. But it wasn't the toaster that was cursed. It was them. Boxes crowded the hallway, taped up and labeled with Ava's sharp handwriting. Clothes, books, misc. Not once did she write memories. They don't believe in those. They believe in property, numbers, inheritance. Things they can pawn and flash. Ready, Grandma? Declan asked, his tone oily with fake kindness. His shirt was too new, his cologne too strong. He wanted to look important, the savior son of a family who had abandoned the very hands that raised them. "I'm ready," I said flatly, rising with my knitting bag on my arm. Nobody glanced at it. Yarn, they thought. Always yarn. The van door slammed. The drive to Seabrook Pines was quiet but thick, like air before thunder. Nora hummed with her earbuds in, Bryce dozed against the window, and Ava scrolled through her phone, smiling at the attention she got from her curated online lies. Declan drummed the steering wheel. No one spoke to me. Not once. Seabrook Pines rose from the pines like a tombstone carved too smooth. The lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and antiseptic, not a place for living but for waiting. Ava signed me in at the desk, her voice syrupy sweet. She'll be very comfortable here. The receptionist nodded, oblivious. Family contact information? Already filled out, I said, sliding the brochure with their signatures across the counter. The receptionist stapled it neatly and smiled. They didn't notice the corner of Ava's mouth twitch, the sudden weight in Declan's eyes. They had signed too easily, too blindly. "Let's show her the room," Ava insisted, eager to finish. The room was small, a narrow bed. A single window with bars too subtle to notice at first glance. A dresser already waiting as if I'd been expected. Declan set the quilt on the bed carelessly. My quilt. I smoothed it, tucked it at the edges. Beneath it, the papers rustled, the copies I'd hidden there. My hand pressed them flat like a prayer. See? Cozy, Nora muttered. Perfect, Ava said. Home, Declan declared. I looked at each of them one by one. Their eyes skittered away. Yes, I whispered. Perfect. That night, I asked the nurse for privacy. She left quickly, too busy, too tired. I pulled the papers from under the quilt and dialed Mr. Harrow. My hand didn't shake. It's done, I told him. They've signed. Good, he said. Then tomorrow we file. They'll be in for a shock. I closed the phone and placed the papers back, careful as a soldier with his rifle. Outside the barred window, the pines bent under the wind. The storm was coming, and it wasn't just weather. But there was more. As I settled into the stiff mattress, a knock tapped at my door. Mrs. Collins, my neighbor, stepped inside. How she'd slipped past the staff, I'll never know. Her eyes glinted with satisfaction. I've got the footage, she whispered, sliding a USB stick into my hand. Them in your kitchen. Talking about Tuesday. Every word. Every insult. I closed my fingers over it. Warm. Heavy. Like justice. The trap was no longer just mine. It was ours. And tomorrow, when those children thought they had put me away for good, I would rise in front of them with proof sharp enough to cut. By dawn, they would understand. The bars on the window weren't for me. They were for them. The storm finally broke on Wednesday night. Rain hammered the windows of Seabrook Pines like fists demanding entry, and thunder rolled low across the coastline. I sat in the narrow bed with my quilt across my knees, the USB drive hidden in my knitting bag. Outside my door, the hallway lights buzzed and flickered, each hum like a warning. They came after visiting hours. I heard their footsteps before I saw them, too many for the quiet halls, too heavy for children who claimed to care. Declan's voice whispered sharp. Ava hissed back. Nora giggled nervously, and Bryce said nothing at all. The door creaked open. Declan stepped inside, carrying something bulky in his jacket. Ava followed with a flashlight, the beam slicing across the small room. She's asleep, she muttered. I wasn't. I lay still, eyes half shut, breath even. My hand clutched the quilt like a fragile dream. She's weak, Ava said. One little push down the stairwell and no one asks questions. Old people fall all the time. Nora snickered, her nerves spilling into cruelty. And we'll cry at the funeral. Post tributes online. Everyone will love us for our loss. Declan stepped closer. His shadow stretched long across the floor. He leaned down, fingers brushing my shoulder. Now, he whispered. And then the light from the hallway shifted. Another sound, a metallic click. The red glow of a tiny lens blinked from the corner shelf. A camera. Not theirs. Mine. Installed that very afternoon while they weren't looking, with Mrs. Collins distracting the staff. I opened my eyes. Cold. Clear. Smile for the camera, I said. They froze. Declan's mouth fell open. Ava's flashlight clattered to the floor. Nora's giggle died like a candle in rain. You thought I was deaf. Thought I was blind. Thought I was finished. I sat up, pulling the quilt back, letting the papers rustle beneath. But I've been listening, watching, recording. Ava lunged toward the lens, but I raised my hand. Too late. Mrs. Collins already has the live feed. Mr. Harrow, too. By sunrise, the police will have it. The storm thundered again, rattling the barred window. Their faces twisted, panic finally pushing through arrogance. You're insane, Declan spat. No, I said evenly. I'm patient. The nurse at the end of the hall called out, Everything all right in there? Ava forced a laugh, her voice high, brittle. Just saying goodnight. But their eyes told the truth. They wanted me gone. And now they knew I wanted them caught. I tucked the quilt over my knees again, steady, calm, as though nothing had happened. Run along, I whispered. Big day tomorrow. Declan hesitated, then shoved his hands in his pockets and stalked out. Ava followed, trembling with fury. Nora lingered at the door, eyes wide, finally realizing the game was bigger than her. Bryce trailed last, head down, shame heavy in his steps. When the door shut, I let out the breath I'd been holding. My heart beat like the storm outside, wild and certain. The trap had sprung, but it wasn't closed yet. Tomorrow, the world would see their faces. And once truth is shown, it can't be unseen. The courtroom smelled of old wood polish and coffee gone bitter. The rain had stopped, but puddles still clung to the steps outside, reflecting the gray sky like bruises on the pavement. I sat straight in the witness chair, quilt folded neatly across my lap, knitting bag at my feet. I wasn't here as their burden anymore. I was here as their reckoning. Ava strutted in first, all sharp heels and sharper perfume, as if arrogance could mask fear. Declan followed, tie crooked, jaw tight, pretending confidence. Nora stayed glued to her phone, thumbs twitching. Bryce trailed behind, shoulders rounded, eyes fixed on the floor. They thought this was just a formality, a chance to make their case and walk away with my home, my savings, my life carved up into their pockets. The judge entered, robes heavy, voice clipped. We're here to address the petition filed by the family of Ms. Joe Ellison. Petition. That was their word. I called it theft. Their lawyer, a smug man with too much gel in his hair, rose. Your Honor, my clients have acted out of concern for their grandmother's well-being. She is unfit to manage her property and finances responsibly. They seek guardianship for her safety. I let the words sit in the stale air. Then Mr. Harrow stood, his suit precise, his voice a blade. Your Honor, before you entertain these claims, allow me to present evidence. He plugged in the USB. The monitor flickered. At first, only voices, Ava's hiss, Declan's cold whisper, Nora's nervous laughter. Tuesday, push her down the stairwell, cry at the funeral. Their own words filled the courtroom, bouncing back at them like a choir of ghosts. Ava's face drained of color. Declan's jaw clenched until it shook. Nora's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Then the video played, the grainy feed from Seabrook Pines. Declan leaning over me. Ava with a flashlight. My voice calm, cutting, smile for the camera. Gasps rose from the benches. A reporter scribbled faster. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Attempted elder abuse, Harrow said firmly. Premeditated fraud. Conspiracy. Lies. Ava exploded, her voice cracking. She set us up. Yes, I said, finally speaking. My voice carried through the quiet like a gunshot. I did, because I knew what you'd do if I didn't. And I let you prove me right. The judge banged his gavel once, silencing the chaos. This is damning evidence. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, he paused, turning to my grandchildren, his tone heavy as iron. This court will open an investigation into your conduct. You should prepare yourselves. Declan slumped back. Ava buried her face in her hands. Nora trembled, whispering, "Oh God, oh God." Bryce just sat frozen, a tear tracing down his cheek. I folded my quilt tighter, as if tucking them in for the night. You wanted my house, I murmured, just loud enough for them to hear. Instead, you'll get my truth. The gavel struck again, final, ringing through the room like the crack of a rifle. And in that moment, I wasn't their frail grandmother. I was the storm they thought had passed, come back to wash them away. The courthouse emptied slow, like a theater after a bloody play. Reporters clustered on the steps, their microphones like hungry mouths. The wind off the coast carried the brine of the tide, sharp, cleansing. I walked between them with Mr. Harrow steady at my side, quilt folded neat in my arms. Behind me, my grandchildren trailed like beaten dogs, faces pale under the camera flashes. Ms. Ellison, how do you feel about your family's betrayal? Did you expect they'd try to have you killed? Do you plan to disinherit them? The questions swarmed, but I didn't flinch. I stopped on the top step and let them all see my face lined, weary but unbroken. They underestimated me, I said, clear, steady. That's all you need to know. The next morning, their shame filled the front page of the Carolina Sentinel, grandchildren caught in plot against elderly grandmother. Ava's face twisted in mid-scream, Declan looking cornered, Nora pale and frantic. Bryce, her boy looked like he wished he could vanish into the paper itself. But the real blow came later that day. Hero stood with me in his office, papers spread like a battlefield map. "It's time," he said, sliding the trust documents across the desk. We announced the fund. The press gathered again, this time at the community center. Cameras blinked like lightning. I stepped up to the podium. My grandchildren were absent. They'd gone into hiding, too humiliated to show their faces. "My late husband and I worked for decades," I began. "This house, this life, it was built from sweat, from sacrifice. And while some thought it could be carved up for greed, I had other plans." I held up the papers. 2 years ago, I sold my home. The money did not vanish. It went here, into the Allison Fund for Children, a trust dedicated to paying hospital bills for families who cannot, to buying wheelchairs, hearing aids, treatments. Gasps. Applause. Reporters scribbled. The mayor herself came forward, shaking my hand with tears in her eyes. "You're saving lives," she said softly. And somewhere I knew Ava's stomach curdled. Declan's fists pounded walls. Nora scrolled through headlines that shredded her curated image. Bryce hid under his blanket, wishing for childhood again. The town that once pitted me now looked at me with respect and looked at them with disgust. Neighbors whispered, head shook. Their perfect reputations shattered like cheap glass. I returned home, my temporary cottage by the shore, humble but mine, and sat by the window with the quilt across my knees. The cicadas hummed. The tide rolled in. I sipped tea and tasted victory. But I knew them too well. They wouldn't stop. Their pride wouldn't let them. Greed is a hunger that never dies easy. And in that certainty, I began planning for the next strike. They didn't crawl away quietly. No, pride won't let snakes stay in the grass. By the 3rd week after court, word reached me through Mrs. Collins, the same sharp-eyed neighbor who'd stood by me, that Ava and Declan had been seen slipping into the office of a certain notary whose reputation smelled like cheap whiskey and forged stamps. "They're desperate," she whispered over my fence, handing me a jar of peach preserves. Desperation makes people sloppy. Sloppy was what I'd been counting on. That night, I sat at my desk with the window open, the sea breeze carrying in the sharp tang of salt and rust. My notebook lay open, every betrayal listed, every date underlined. I added a new entry, attempted forgery, watch for signatures. It didn't take long. The next morning, Declan swaggered into my cottage with a grin too wide, Ava trailing behind him like a shadow with teeth. They carried a manila folder, thick and smug. Nora lingered at the door, chewing her nails raw, and Bryce stood back, eyes darting. Grandma Ava purred, laying the folder on my table. "We've been talking. We realized how unfair we were. We want to make things right." "Is that so?" I asked, keeping my voice flat as the tide at Slackwater. Declan slid the paper across. "We've drawn up a new will for you. Cleaner. Easier. Less complicated. All you have to do is sign." I didn't even look down at it. Instead, I poured coffee into 4 cups, set them on the table, and let the silence grow thick. They shifted, eyes flicking to the folder, then back to me. Finally, I smiled. A small smile, but it froze them. "Funny thing. That's not a will." Declan blinked. "What are you?" "It's a transfer," I interrupted, my voice cutting like broken glass. "By signing, you just placed your own accounts into a trust one control. The very same trust that funds the hospital bills you sneer at. Your bank balances are no longer yours. They're evidence of your stupidity." Ava went white, her hands trembling. Nora gasped, whispering, You set us up." "Yes," I said calmly. "And you walked right in." Declan snatched the papers, eyes scanning frantically. The notary stamp was there, real enough, but the language wasn't theirs anymore. Harrow had written every word. Their signatures, careless, greedy strokes, already bled across the bottom. "You tricked us." Declan's voice cracked, rage curdling into fear. "No," I said, leaning forward. "You tricked yourselves. I simply gave you the rope." Bryce slumped into a chair, head in his hands. Ava's jaw trembled as tears streaked her makeup. Nora whispered, "We're ruined." Outside, Mrs. Collins' car pulled into the drive. She walked in without knocking, camera in hand. "Smile," she said. "We've been recording since you arrived." Declan's face collapsed. Ava covered hers. "And me?" I folded my quilt neatly on the armrest and watched. Calm. Certain. Because now they weren't just liars. They were documented thieves. And the court wouldn't hesitate to turn their greed into chains. The courthouse was fuller this time. Reporters, neighbors, even strangers who'd read the headlines and wanted to see the monsters up close. Ava sat with her face hidden behind dark glasses, though no lenses could hide shame. Declan fidgeted, jaw tight, hands trembling despite his show of confidence. Nora chewed her lip until it bled. Bryce slumped low, eyes red-rimmed, looking like he wanted to vanish. Judge Callahan adjusted her glasses, voice firm and final. "The evidence is irrefutable. These documents prove a deliberate attempt at fraud. Combined with prior attempts at elder abuse, the court has no choice but to rule accordingly." The gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot. "Your petition for guardianship is dismissed permanently. Your fraudulent documents have been seized. And as restitution, you will each serve a minimum of 1,200 hours of mandatory community service at the Ellison Fund for Children." The words hung heavy, almost sweet. Mandatory service. At my fund. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed. Ava hissed, "You can't do this," her voice cracking. "Oh, but they can," I said, my tone calm, my eyes cutting through her like broken glass. "And I already did." Declan slammed a fist against the table, but the bailiff's stare froze him cold. Nora whimpered into her sleeve. Bryce said nothing at all, silent tears streaking down his cheeks. When it was over, they filed out under the eyes of the whole town. Neighbors muttered. Someone spat at Declan's feet. Ava tried to hide, but the cameras caught her anyway, her fall from self-made glory preserved forever. I walked slowly down the courthouse steps, quilt folded in my arms, the sea breeze cool against my face. The reporters rushed me again, shouting questions. I stopped just once to let them see the truth. My grandchildren wanted my house. My money. My silence, I said. Instead, they'll work for children who actually deserve a future. That is justice. Applause broke out real, raw, rising from strangers and neighbors alike. Weeks later, I visited the fund's office. And there they were. Ava sorting boxes of donated clothes, her manicure chipped and ruined. Declan hauling crates of medical supplies, sweat darkening his expensive shirt. Nora stapling forms until her fingers blistered. Bryce quietly reading to sick children in the corner, the only one whose eyes still held some flicker of humanity. They froze when I entered. I didn't gloat, didn't smile wide. I simply placed 4 small boxes on the table. Inside each, drawings, toys, and keepsakes they'd made for me when they were little. A crooked clay mug, a faded crayon heart, a paper crown. They stared, speechless. "This is all you'll inherit from me," I said softly. "Not because I hate you. Because you buried the good in yourselves long before you tried to bury me." Ava's lip quivered. Declan looked away. Nora cried quietly. Bryce clutched the paper crown in shaking hands. I turned, quilt still folded across my arm, and left them standing in the silence they had earned. The sun outside was warm on my face, and the ocean wind carried the clean salt of freedom. They thought Tuesday would be my end. Instead, it became theirs.